Hello. Okay. Trying to go live on all of these channels and then we should be ready. So it's been a while and I hope that you are able to join me. Let's see. No. There we go. Okay. So I hope, hello everyone. I hope this is working. It's been a while since I was on a live, and there are a lot of reasons about why that's been the case. Partly because I worked very hard on the Polyglot conference and I definitely needed some time to get back to other things. And so, yeah, I needed about a month or so just to sort of catch up with a lot of other things that I had to do. Hello to everyone joining. Really nice to see you all. And thank you all very much for your questions. I got questions on lots of different channels. So I thought I'd start with those as normal, and then we can go from there. And if there are any questions that you have, feel free to let me know, and I'll be very, very happy to answer them. So, so yeah, I'll be looking out on all of them. Hello from Georgia. Hello. How are things going? Hi from Dublin. Wow, people all over the world here. This is so cool. It's so nice to see you all again. I really enjoy it. I missed not seeing you. Merhaba, merhaba. Really, really nice. So thank you for coming. So the questions I got, I'll start with the ones I got on Facebook, which were, what do I think about learning a language without reading any books? And people who find books boring, or they just want to read things that are interesting. I don't think that it's a problem not to read a book. I definitely think that you can learn a language without reading books, of course. Anybody who says you can't, I think it's possibly not quite true, because there are people who learn their own language and multiple languages without reading many books themselves, and it works fairly well for what they want to do. If you don't talk about literature as well, it's not likely to come up in your conversations, or you'll avoid that kind of conversation, I guess. So yeah, there are other things you can read. Read things that you find interesting. So if you find you've got a hobby, read things about your hobby in the language. Read things that are sort of, things that genuinely excite you, because when it comes to language learning, you need to be motivated, and the only way to be motivated is to be genuinely interested in what you're doing. So I don't really see the point in forcing yourself to do things that you don't want to do. It feels like a counterproductive and counterintuitive thing to do, because it feels like it should be the right thing to do. And I think a lot of us do fall into those traps of, yeah, everyone else says they're doing this, so therefore I should do it. I'm a great believer in doing what we want to do because we want to do it and that interests us. So yeah, absolutely. Not reading, as as some people may find that quite a bad thing for me to say, but I actually think that if you don't want to read, then don't force yourself to do something. You'll just end up hating learning the language if you force yourself to read things you're not interested in. Do you have any tips for learning? Oh, the aviole, the trill. Honestly, with so Chris Davis, you wrote this on Facebook. There are people who speak languages with this trill. So the this trill is this r sound that you have in like languages like Spanish, like perro and perro, and it's the difference. So there's a difference that's made, but, and this is the big but, there are many native monolingual speakers of these languages who cannot make that sound, and they get by quite fine. What they normally do, and the languages I know where this happens, that I hear this in the Balkans, in Macedonian, and also in Spanish and in Italian. I know I have friends and I've met many people who speak this way. Instead of the r, they say r, more like a French guttural sound. So they'd say, for example, instead of dobro, they'd say dobro. So, and yeah, it's not the standard way of pronouncing it. At the same time, it's completely intelligible, it's completely understandable. And some people just seem not to be able to make that noise. And I don't think it's the end of the world. So I know it feels bad. Hey, gummy, because I forgot. And I don't think it's the end of the world to do that. I think that just making that r sound is actually fine. So I wouldn't worry about it, Chris. Honestly, I really wouldn't. Her question: can you learn 3 languages at the same time? Potentially, you can. You can learn whatever you want when you want. The only thing you've got to keep in mind is the more you do, the more you divide your time. So if you are studying 3 languages all at once, then of course your attention's divided by 3. So you can only be thinking about a language at a time. You can't necessarily be thinking about all 3 languages at the same time. That would be pretty difficult. So I would definitely encourage you to do what you need to do, and remember that a language isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So you can always go back to it if you can't. So I wouldn't worry too much. Is it possible to learn a new language through different tools without studying much of its grammar rules? Yes, you don't necessarily need to study grammar. I mean, a lot of English speakers don't actually know the grammar of English, but they speak the language. Many people, even who go to the UK later in life and are non-native speakers of the language, learn it as a second language or third or something. They don't always learn grammar. The thing about grammar is that it's the skeleton on which the body of the language sits. So it's a necessary evil insofar as you have to be able to manipulate the language using its grammar to be coherent. Now, the more you can do that, the more precise you are in your ability to use the grammar and manipulate it, the better it sounds, right? So I think that, of course, you can fudge the language, you can put words together, you can make lots of mistakes, and it's not the end of the world because communication is not always necessarily hampered. But if you want to sound like your most educated self in a new language, then of course getting the grammar wrong, people sometimes can laugh, especially when you get to a stage in the language where you're getting very good at it because you know a lot of words. It can be a problem if you don't pay any attention to it at all. So I think it's worth listening actively and doing your best to imitate how people speak if you don't want to study the grammar as in learn books. I am actually fairly well against sitting and studying just reams and reams of pages of grammar rules, because studying it's an interesting thing to do in and of itself. It doesn't necessarily make somebody a great and fluent or fluid speaker of a language just because you studied all the language rules, and it also doesn't mean you're going to get them correct when you speak. So yeah, I've met people who know a lot about language and a lot about grammar, but when they actually come to speak the language, they find it challenging for many reasons. Most of it because they're so involved in the whole idea of getting it all perfectly right that they get scared. So I definitely think that it's better to just get into it and start speaking it. Okay. I see that there are some questions coming in. I definitely will come to your questions. Nice to see you all joining. Says gott gummi, ja, så häftigt. Så gamla hejra. Okay. Thank you for I'm just looking. There were a couple of messages on YouTube. Yeah, it's another question about grammar, about whether it can demotivate you. It can demotivate you if you get just stuck on learning things in a sort of a very divorced way from the actual language. I think I'm very keen on people learning, or even myself, learning grammar and vocabulary in context, because that's the best way for it to really stick in your mind. I don't think that it's necessarily the best thing to study this stuff without any context at all. Now, let me just see if I can find the other things I had, and they've seemed to have disappeared, which is a pain. But oh no, here they are. I found them again. Right. Maybe the reason I don't have a good relation with the language. Do you have any idea? I'm not sure. Okay. Oh yeah, I see this now. This is 2 questions in one. So I speak 6 languages fluently. This is from Instagram. So speak languages fluently, but the shocking problem is that my English level is. What should I do? It's because you don't have a relationship to the language. Potentially, if you don't feel the language, you don't have a real connection with it. Sometimes it can be difficult to really keep it going and to improve it. So I think that it is always important to find, and you can find that. It doesn't mean just because you don't have it now, it doesn't mean you can't find it in the future. It definitely is something you can look for, but what you need to do is go back to, okay, why do I want to speak it at this level? What's the reason? What's the motivation for that? Because if you don't really need it at any particularly high level, then it's going to be difficult to find reasons to do it. Because you can't fool yourself when you're learning anything. You know the truth. It would be very strange for you to try and lie to yourself. So you've got to always be very truthful about your reasons and your motivations and your time and your actual desire to study. There are many people that say, I want to speak a language just because they think it sounds cool. Well, sounding cool is not a reason to learn a language. It might get you so far, but unfortunately, you will get to a point where reality bites. It's the similar thing to people who want to be fit or want, go to the gym and build up muscles and things like that. It will get you so far just thinking it's cool. There's work to be done if you really want to get to a high level of fluency and ability in the language. How long have you been stuck at intermediate plateau? Forever in some languages. It's a good question, Said. Forever. And how do you overcome it? Well, sometimes you don't overcome it. Sometimes you just stay at an intermediate or even a basic level in a language. And it can be for a number of reasons. It could be because you don't really need to be any better than that. It could be that, what you can do in the language is actually enough for what you need it for your friend circle. Could be just that you go there on holiday. It could be that you just visit from time to time. And actually what you know is enough. So I don't always look to overcome these plateaus that we talk about of you get to a level in a language and it sort of just coasts. Sometimes you get over them naturally. Sometimes you can work at them. At the moment, I'm working on a few of my languages where I want to kind of get over a hump where I felt like I've coasted for a long time now, and I'm working on them. The only thing is with an intermediate to going up to a more advanced level is that the amount of vocabulary that you need to push it that bit further is actually quite vast. It's a lot of words, a lot of terminology, a lot of expressions. These things fill books, so it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to actually overcome some of these issues. And I've been doing it recently with Turkish, with Greek, and with Albanian, but I just wanted to take them to the next level. And it's taking time. It's just taking a lot of time. I enjoy it very much. I like the languages very much. It's just taking time. How long does it take to master French if you practice every day? That is how long is a piece of string is what my family would say to that. Basically, it depends what you're doing and it depends how much time you're dedicating it to it. If you're saying you practice it every day and you're only practicing it for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, then of course, it's going to take you a long time. If you're doing really in-depth study and practicing it with a purpose and testing your boundaries, because you could practice the same thing every single day and stay at the same level. Remember that with languages, like with many other spheres of knowledge, you can quite happily sit on a kind of depending on what you're doing, an A2, B1, maybe a B2 level quite happily for many, 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 many years, even a whole lifetime, and it's enough. And if you're only practicing the same things that you already know, and maybe a couple of words here, there extra, you're not really going to master to the degree that I think you mean here, as in you can really pick apart the language and be very nuanced in your style of communication. You're just not, because you're not going out of your comfort zone, and it's that you need to do if you really want to push the boundaries and move forward in a language. It's getting out of your comfort zone. It's doing things that you're not used to doing. It's talking about subjects that are not necessarily in your direct sphere of interest or what you talk about generally. You may need to watch things on TV, talk to people who are experts in different fields, and the language improves gradually over time. It's amazing when you learn a language and, let's say, for example, you hear an expression and then you find out what the words in the expression mean later, or what other meanings they have. And you only find those out often when you come into contact with people who talk about very different things to what you're used to talking about. How many languages do you think you can maintain at the C level? So the C1, C2 level, it's all a bit strange. Personally, I've not really met anybody who could do that much beyond, I don't know. I think a normal amount, sort of as a max, would be about 8 to 10. Just simply because why would you need any more than that at all at that kind of level, really? It's often a very high level. But yeah, I have met people who have done that, but I don't think it's necessarily very important to have languages at those higher levels, because you have to maintain them. How do you refresh your rusty languages? Depends on the language. Sometimes I don't. So Vicky, sometimes I don't find it necessary to refresh my rusty languages. I think it's something that I will only do if I need to do it, and so they could be different reasons. And what I tend to do if I want to do it is review what I've done in the past. So, for example, if I wanted to review my Finnish, I studied Finnish at the University of Helsinki a few years ago, and if I wanted to go back to Finnish, I would go back to my books, Suomen Mestari, and I would review all of I did the first 3 books of Suomen Mestari, and I would review that and sort of go through that again, and then just start trying to speak. I imagine I've lost a lot, because it's a fairly unrelated language to the other languages I've studied, and I've definitely not studied any further in that language group than Finnish. So yeah, I'd say that would be what I'd do. How to teach it properly? Oh, that's a very big question. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go through all of that. This is Abdul, but that's a little bit too big for the scope of what I can talk about in this. And also, I don't necessarily teach languages myself as my job. So I definitely defer to somebody with more knowledge and more relevant experience. I know how I would teach myself, and I know how I would teach my daughter, for example. But if you follow my blog, I'm going to be updating on this new thing that I'm doing with my daughter. We're learning Korean together. She asked me to learn Korean with her. So I'm updating my blog now, and I will be making some YouTube videos as well to sort of document how that's going. And that will obviously go through the whole teaching learning thing. What does my daily learning plan look like when I'm learning a new language? You actually, just as a link to this actually, Need the Daily Learner, Any the Daily Learner, sorry. I read that sort of as a different language from at the start. But yeah, if you follow the story with Korean, you're going to get to see that firsthand, because I'm going to document everything I'm doing with Korean. I started the blog almost a week ago. I'm going to do weekly updates, and the plan is that I will start the actual full-time learning probably in a month's time, just because at the moment I'm learning the very basics so that I can get going with it. Okay. Luke on Twitter asked me, what's the coolest experience in language learning? So the coolest thing about experience in language learning, it's a very good question. I would say, I think it's always the point where you can start using a language to communicate your ideas for the very first time, and you feel like a conversation is flowing only in that language. That's the coolest thing. And I've had that so many times and really enjoyed it. I remember actually some of those moments in my head that where I could all of a sudden the language made sense. And I remember feeling that way in Italy at the university in Verona, where actually the language just clicked. And it clicked because I already spoke Spanish very, very well. And my Italian was okay. I mean, I'd studied all of the grammar and I was in the advanced group at the University of Verona. But it always felt like I was speaking it through Spanish. And it was listening to Spanish people speaking Italian, strangely, that really activated my Italian as a very different language, because I listened to their accent in Italian and I started imitating a Spanish accent in Italian. And then that helped me, strangely as well, to divorce Spanish completely from Italian. And then my Italian sort of went straight after that. So I think those moments are the coolest for me. Okay, so I got a question again on Twitter saying, a while back I posted a photo about language books that lent heavily towards the teach yourself or colloquial ranges. Yeah, I have a lot of colloquial teach yourself and assimil books. And I've also got the then follow-up question to this is, can you discuss how you go about using these and how to use the dialogue? How much time do you spend on explanations, especially with the Slavic? So good question. And if there are any other materials that I use, yes. So I do use the materials too. I don't just use one set of materials. I will often start on teach yourself assimil or colloquial, just because I like the way it's set out. Assimil is quite different to the other two because it's very much sort of dialogue based, a lot of humor's involved, and they give you quirky, funny stories that are meant to stick in your mind, right? So Assimil is quite different in that way, but the other two are set out in quite on a way that they give you the days of the week, the months of the year, talking about your hobbies, talking about your family, talking about your travel plans, what you're doing, where you're from, all that kind of stuff. And they set it out in different chapters. Now, I find that quite a sensible thing to have. So if I'm using any, I like to use that as a base anyway. It tends to be the base of any course that you would do at school, university, college as well. They would always teach you those topics first. And the reason is because you talk about yourself most, and you're the first person you talk about, right? So it's good. And then you can transfer that information over to another person, whether it's your brother, your mother, your sister, your husband, your wife, your spouse, your partner, your child, your best friend, whoever you want to talk about. And so it's actually really good to have that as a basis, because you know that you're going to be able to start from somewhere and talk about things that you know about and you feel confident about. So I'm a big fan of that as a starting point. Now, after I've done things like that, what I like to do as well, and quite readily, obviously these courses also are aware themselves that they can't possibly contain all of the possible vocabulary that you would need, all of the possible ways of using the language that you could need in every single situation. So where possible, I like to find locally sourced materials too. And these locally sourced materials tend to be targeted at people who have moved to the country and are trying to live in that environment. So they tend to be quite practical. They go over similar types of topics. And so you can sort of go into that and sort of broaden your base. And then they also often go a bit further as well. So there are some really cool ones that I found in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, in Hungary. They have things like this all over the world. They have these kinds of things. So in terms of the Slavic, which I think was part of the question, I'm just going to show you the books that I have. So I really recommend these books for Czech. If you've already done the Teach Yourself Colloquial or Asimil, then these are pretty good actually. And this is called Czechina pro život. So they actually are, they're pretty much all in Czech, I think. And then they've got the vocabulary in English and German. But they go through, this is from, which one's this? Is this back to a B1 or B2? I can't remember now. But I bought this one, and then I bought when I was in Czech Republic once, and then I saw that they had this one as well. And even though I haven't really used it, I like to have these kinds of books because I find them really fun to flick through. They have stories, they have expressions, they have things that, for example, you can read through that are more like what you'd see in newspapers and things like that. And they're a little bit more exciting to read than the university books that I have, because I studied Czech at university in Prague at Charles University, and those course books are a little bit drier, but these are quite fun. So I always recommend if you go to the country and you're able to, or if you have friends or people that you know in the country, they can often give you some really good advice. If you ask people you know for advice on, or to go to a bookshop in the city or in the town where they're from, they can always look and see and tell you what's available. So even take photos and send them, and maybe have a look inside and tell you what they're like. But if you're there yourself, you can flick through them and look through and see if they appeal to you. But I definitely recommend doing things like that if you're doing it. So there we are. I think I've reached the end of the questions that I had already sent to me. So I'm going to quickly look through and see what else I have. Thank you all so much for sticking with me while I go through all of those. But I think it's nice to have these questions where often they come up as well, and I answer them before I see them. So nice to see you. Hello from Bulgaria. Zdravej, kaksi. Hello from Scotland. Hello. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Shalom from Israel. Hello, nice to see you. From Los Angeles. Wow, you're from all over the world. I can't believe that. It's amazing. I love it. From Sudan. Wow. How's my Korean going? Slowly, Chanel. It's still the very beginning. I mean, I'm just learning the alphabet at the moment still. So what am I learning now? At the moment, taking on Korean because my daughter wants to learn it. So I'm going to be learning that with her. And yeah, we'll see how we get on. It's she surprised me by wanting to learn a language I haven't studied. But I've put some details on my blog. I've written a blog post about what I'm doing with Korean and why. Okay. So nice to see you, Paulino. What's your opinion about corrective feedback, in a language for teaching? I think it's really good. It's particularly good if people use it. So sometimes I find it's a nice thing to do. So sort of corrective feedback, mirroring back mistakes, for example, speaking back in the correct version. So somebody makes a mistake. Let's say, for example, someone says to me in English, "Oh, I do many mistakes," and I say, "Yes, you make many mistakes, but it's not that important because you're already communicating well in English." And I correct it and then add a nice little compliment to give them some positivity as well. Yes, I found that some people are very good at listening to that kind of feedback, and they self-correct afterwards and they repeat back. Now, as a learner, we do need to listen actively. When somebody says something back to us and it's what we've said, usually that's an indication that we've actually made a mistake, and we need to repeat it so that we can internalize it, figure out what the mistake was, even ask them outright. Okay, well, what did I say? What do you think I said? And why was it wrong? Figure out why it was wrong, and then go back and repeat it. It's really, really useful to do. But some people just don't do it, especially if they're not into learning languages or it's not their main passion. So as a teacher, I can imagine you would do that and it would just go in one ear and out of the other, and the child would carry on and wander off. And that does happen too. And it's because their field of interest just isn't there with languages, and so they're not necessarily listening. It's often good to explain when that happens, I think, as a teacher or as a language partner, just to say, look, I will echo back the correct version if I hear you make a mistake. And and so that they're aware of it, make it a conscious thing. Is there any evidence? I haven't researched it, so I wouldn't be able to give evidence, but I just from my own experience, that's kind of where I can speak from. Hey, Nick, good to see you. Okay, so let me just move this here so that I can see this screen. Okay, reams of pages and grammar rules are fun for some people. They are for you, Nick. I know you like your grammar rules. Cool. Let me see. So we haven't heard from you for a while. Were you busy? Yeah, I was busy and I needed some time because there are some changes after I had the conference at the Polyglot conference. I was extremely tired and I needed also to catch up on work and make some new plans as well. So I'm doing some new projects that I'm very excited about. And so, so yeah, I needed a bit of time. So watching movies and TV in target languages, is this a good idea with subtitles? Yeah, I think it can be. You've got to watch that you just don't get carried away with listening to your own language or reading your own language and ignoring the target language, because you just find the actual thing itself more interesting than the language itself. So see, be careful with that. But yeah, it can be a very good way of diving into it. And do I pause shows and write down that? Only if I pause to write down vocabulary or expressions, or to just keep going. Usually just keep going because things that I need to know or want to know often come up and are repeated many, many times. So only if, for example, it's something that I desperately do want to know because I know that I want to use it actively myself, and I think that it's important to make a note of it so that I can make a more conscious effort to internalize the expression or the vocabulary. Otherwise, no, I don't tend to. Okay, let me see. Okay, so somebody's written here that they find religious texts good. Okay, Oleg, yeah, you're not religious, but you find that religious texts good for learning languages. Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things. I mean, the Bible is a very well translated book, or the Quran. They've got many, many different versions. So you could read text like that because you can then compare and contrast. Obviously, the Old Testament talks a lot about tabernacles and cubits and very bizarre measurements in English that even I, as a native English speaker, I'm not 100% sure I've internalized what they actually mean. So sometimes it can be a bit abstract, the language in those kinds of texts. But yes, I've definitely known people look at those things, especially for languages where there are fewer materials. So Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, have an awful lot of languages on their Watchtower site that they use, and so you get languages that you cannot normally find many materials for. So yes, I mean, you don't need to be religious or sort of believe a religion to find the actual materials useful. I think that many people in history have also learnt languages because of the Bible and the translations of the Bible, especially in Europe. And I imagine a similar thing is true of the Quran, especially because you tend to have the Quran tends to be presented in Arabic with the local language translation as well. So you know, for learning Arabic, or the old Quranic Arabic at least, be quite handy. Although many of my my own Muslim friends, they tended to go to school to read the Quran, but they when they went, they just learned how to read it out loud, as in verbalize it, but they didn't actually learn Arabic. So, what motivates you to learn languages? Well, I just like learning languages. I think you have to find your own motivation for language learning. It's really important that you feel happy with that. I'm just going to have a quick look on YouTube and just check to see. Pozdrav iz Slovenije, pozdrav Tim. Kako gre? Do we need to repeat okay? Do you need to repeat words in order to learn them? I think it is important to repeat because basically language learning is overlearning. It's learning something to the point that it becomes automatic. So the only way for something to become automatic is to either hear it many, many times or say it many, many times or write it many, many times, and it becomes automatic. And that's how we learnt our first languages, by being overexposed to the language to the point that it's an automatic thing. So yes, I think that that is very important. Saludos desde Carolina del Norte. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Todo bien? Profesor de Estados Unidos. Muy bien. What lessons from a polyglot learner can I take to my Spanish class? I think there are many. So Jesus, I think that there are many things that I think polyglots' passions, actually, probably the extreme passion for learning languages and wanting to learn many things, and that's probably something that's something that polyglots can give. I think that there is a place in the world for every learner. I actually find people who are passionate even about one language extremely motivational, and people find it cool, right, when you can use a language. So yeah, I think maybe that, and then a lot of the other things I've been talking about during this live. How can you acquire English via listening, Fernanda? Well, I suppose it you can use podcasts, you can read along, and then you hear what's being said. Subtitles along with the spoken English often help, because sometimes English can be one of those languages where you don't always hear every single thing, because we tend to make the words run into each other. We tend to swallow a lot of our words. We tend to abbreviate things, and like many languages. And I think that sometimes actually reading it as well helps when you hear it, so that you can start differentiating between the different words. Tim asked me in which languages I usually read novels. I don't really have that much time to read novels, unfortunately, Tim. I tend to read factual documents, and they tend to be in different languages. So they're in any language they tend to be in. Just really depends. Quite often, obviously, living in the Balkans, I do read things in the Balkan languages, particularly in Serbian or in Macedonian, Bulgarian. They would be the most common, and then also Albanian and Turkish. And then every now and again I'll read a bit of Greek, but my Greek isn't as strong. When do we need to repeat words we've learned? Okay, all the time, Richard. I think that it's important to repeat words as often as possible. I mean, memory experts would often use this sort of 5 rule. So this 5-day or week rule that they use, where you sort of repeat something as soon as you've learned it, and then you do it the next day, and then you do it the following week, and then you have to go through and keep using it, so that sort of one of my friends, actually, David James, he has this thing called the gold list method, and you write these new words down, and then they go from one list to another, from a gold list to a silver list, and so on and so forth, and you just keep writing and rewriting and testing yourself to see how much you've actually remembered. How much time do I need to activate a language that was at a B level before and didn't use? Tim, that's a good question. Depends on the language. If it's similar to languages I already speak, not much time at all. If it's very different to languages I speak, longer. So it depends on what the language is related to. Okay. Jeg vil gerne stille et specifikt spørgsmål. Hvilket niveau af dansk har du øjeblik? Okay. Hvad jeg snakker dansk. Jeg snakker ikke så godt. Det er okay. Jeg forstår vel. Men med at tale som en dansk, ja, det kan jeg ikke. Men jeg forstår godt, ja. Hvilket niveau? Jeg ved ikke. Jeg ved ikke. Olá, Richard. Sou do Brasil e estou aprendendo inglês. Como faço para o listening se tornou natural para mim. Isso é o... Agora, eu estava falando disso em inglês. Agora, eu acho que ler um texto também e ouvir as palavras também de uma maneira, com um podcast ou algo assim. Isso é muito importante, porque o inglês é uma língua com muita variedade e também preciso de realmente ouvir as palavras e saber em quem consiste um texto. E isso é uma coisa bem difícil em inglês. Também outras línguas, mas inglês ao ser que é bem difícil. Então, para poder ler alguma coisa, como, por exemplo, também pode ser um livro com áudio do livro também. Pode ser uma ajuda. So continue escutando. Yeah, it's very good to just keep listening. So when we need to repeat words, okay, I've seen this question a few times now, so I got it, I think. Okay. How do you know when you've reached a C level? You could potentially sit an exam to see if you've reached a C level, and see whether or not the examiner agrees that you've reached the C level. Honestly, I think it's all very subjective. It feels like it should be objective, but it's not. It's definitely subjective. I've met people who have passed the C1 and C2 exams in languages, and I honestly, on hearing them, I would have guessed that they had more of a B2 level when I heard them speak. But I am also aware that when people sit exams, sometimes they actually learn to pass the exam and not to actually have the level. So difficult thing to answer, unfortunately. It's probably a presentation in of itself of when you get to a level and when you know. I think, look, if you can use a language to a level of a C, it's pretty advanced. I mean, the level of vocabulary and mastery of the language generally is quite high. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's something I need to develop in terms of an idea to answer it more fully. Okay, what do you think? Why other Slavs usually understand Slovak much better than Czech? After all, both languages are very similar, only because of the sound in Czech or because of other reasons. So, Tim, I think that Czech is actually harder for people to understand because it's not as open in terms of the pronunciation. It has sounds that don't exist in the Slavic languages, like the r in Czech, and that often throws people when they're listening to it. So it sounds like it's, in Slovak, 303. It's a lot easier to understand because you don't have the sound in it as well that throws people, and that happens in many words in Czech, that you have this that even some Czechs can't pronounce. So yeah, I think it's that's the problem. I think that Slovak is just that much more open in terms of pronunciation, and so a lot clearer to understand. So same with Portuguese and Spanish. Portuguese from Brazil and Portuguese from Portugal. Brazilian Portuguese is easier for Spanish speakers in Latin America to understand than European Portuguese is for Iberian Spanish speakers. Because Portuguese from Portugal is it's harder for them to get even words that are similar. It's harder for them to understand them if they haven't studied. Hello from Ukraine. Hi, nice to see you. We're reading about 30 minutes to 3 hours a day in German around university as a way to learn. What do you think of the efficacy of this as a method in and of itself? It's good. I mean, look, learning, doing lots of reading is really good. It's good to combine it with other things as well. I'm kind of it depends what you want to do, right? If you want to just read in German, fantastic. Read. If you want to actually speak the language as well and understand it when it's spoken, then you need to combine it with other things. So I would say taking opportunities to actually talk about what you're reading with people so that you are actively using the language. Otherwise, it can be a very passive thing like Latin. It can, there are people I mean, Latin, obviously, there are people that do learn to speak it, but generally as a subject at school, it tends to be a passive understanding of Latin that people get, right? And I think it's important, because these are living languages like German, it's important to also activate them and use them. Hola, Richard. ¿Cómo buscas la motivación para aprender distintos idiomas? Pues depende de la situación, la verdad. Es que viviendo en otros países también, si tengo que trabajar con un idioma, o si estoy hablando con amigos, con colegas de trabajo, pues tengo la motivación porque quiero comunicar mis ideas, ¿no? Ahora mismo estoy aprendiendo el coreano con mi hija porque ella quiere aprender el idioma, y por eso sí que es un poco más difícil, porque no tengo la misma motivación como, por ejemplo, para aprender cuando aprendí español o cuando aprendí francés o lo que sea, porque vivía en los países y estudiaba en el idioma también. Pero eso sí que hay que buscar una motivación, y hay que buscar, y yo sigo siempre buscando motivaciones para continuar, para tener más motivaciones para aprender un idioma y para ir más adelante con el idioma también, para realmente ir como y tener un vocabulario más profundo, tener también para manejar la gramática con más fluidez, también es súper importante. Y para hacer eso sí que hay que tener intereses también en el idioma, que sean, por ejemplo, cosas como tipo Netflix, o si hay series o películas en el idioma, o también canciones o lo que sea. Así que hay que buscar cosas realmente que te interesen. Okay, how do I proceed in my languages? You're stuck at learning, entering medical university. How do I turn my motivation back on? That is a very good question, Trish. Finding things that you're interested in, because when you start talking about things that actually genuinely interest you, with people, and you find people who speak the language as well, who want to talk about those topics, that's a natural thing that will spark your interest again. So you could try and do that. I found that really useful when you do activities together. For example, when I was in Czech Republic and I went to salsa class, and I wanted to learn how to dance salsa, and I had to use Czech because I was learning salsa. I learned Catalan through Czech with other Czech students, and I love learning languages. So learning it, I learned Greek in the Netherlands because I knew that I would speak more Dutch with Dutch people, and I loved it. Absolutely loved doing that kind of stuff. Yeah, so try doing things like that. That's a really cool thing to do. It helps. Okay. Was mache ich eigentlich beruflich? Also beruflich im Moment arbeite ich in sozialen Medien. Also ich gebe jetzt Rat, wie man eigentlich auf mehreren Sprachen und in verschiedenen Ländern arbeiten kann. Also das heißt auf Facebook, Twitter, YouTube und so weiter und so fort. Und das ist eigentlich mein Beruf. Ich bin Languages Director in einer Firma, die eigentlich mit verschiedenen Kunden arbeitet. Und das mache ich jetzt gerade im Moment. Und ja, sowas. Okay, do you still learn Maori? Actually, I've had to take a break. My teacher had a baby, and so then the conference happened, and yeah, so I've had a break from Maori just for that time. I'm hoping I'll get back into it in the new year. Any advice for the eternal A1, A2 stage? Oh yeah, I know that, Punky, I know that, absolutely. I've been learning Polish for years and can't read books in it yet, which is how you like to practice. Yeah, I know that feeling. Actually, Punky, I would recommend a podcast called Real Polish. It's a really nice podcast that will use your A1, A2 level, but also take you a bit beyond as well. It's a really nice podcast, and if you can find that, Piotr is the guy who does it, and he's got a great accent and a great pronunciation of Polish. It's super, super clear, and he's really engaging. He's got a nice voice, and as we say here, a nice color to his voice, a nice What we say in English now, a nice tone to his voice. That's what we say. We don't say colour in English. It's a very Macedonian way of saying it. But yeah, a nice tone to his voice, and I think that you will enjoy that. Enjoy the A1, A2 level in Polish. So it's Piotr, and it's called Real Polish is the podcast. Great, and you can also get the text to go with it, so you can do your reading and listening at the same time. Spreekt u nog steeds Nederlands? Ja, dat kan ik wel. Ik heb zo lang in Nederland gewoond en ja, zo lang Nederlands als eerste taal eigenlijk van mijn werk gebruikt. Dus ik vind het een beetje moeilijk om zo'n taal kwijt te raken. Dat kan ik niet vergeten. Ik vind het voor mij is gewoon normaal en natuurlijk om Nederlands te praten. Ja. Do you like Slavic words in Romanian? Yes, they're cute. I learned that they use the word for zid, which is like a wall. They use it for talking about certain things, as they have that word in Romanian as well, which I found quite surprising. Eigentlich Polyglot Meetings an. Also die Polyglot Meetings, also Polyglot Conference dieses Jahr war eigentlich online. Es war Polyglot Conference Global und das findet sich auf die Webseite polyglotconference.com und da kannst du, also wir haben ein Forum da drauf und du kannst eigentlich da schreiben mit den Leuten, die da sind. Okay, und gibt es einen Kalender? Ja, also jedes Jahr im Oktober normalerweise machen wir das. Also nächstes Jahr hoffentlich werden wir alle in Mexiko sein und auch online. Wir werden also beide Sachen machen. Wie läuft das überhaupt? So jemanden, der das regelmäßig organisiert? Ja, ich mache das jedes Jahr und wir organisieren eigentlich Leute, die kommen und die sprechen über verschiedene Themen auch. Und ja, so Leute, die eigentlich eine Sprache sprechen oder mehrere Sprachen sprechen. Und ja, es läuft ziemlich gut. Ich finde das eigentlich, für mich ist es auch was Positives und ich finde es toll, um sowas zu machen. Ja. Yeah, in Slovene you use the color of the voice. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's a Slavic thing, maybe a South Slavic thing. Geweldig dat je deze taal nog behaalt. Ja, bedankt. Do you know Portuguese? Sem falo português também. Falo português de Portugal e português do Brasil. Please, can you tell me that I need to do my studying? I feel like it comes from you. Okay. If it comes from you, it might actually go to the textbook. Okay, Molly Glot, you've got to go and study. Go and study. It's really important. Как у тебя дела с русским? Ну, хорошо, нормально. Это для меня тоже как славянский язык. Я говорю по-македонски дома со мной, и поэтому говорить по-русски это очень trudно. Vernik Genger at leren Íslensku. Ég fara á Íslandi, ég gerði námskeið á Háskóla Íslands og ég fara á Íslandi svo mikið og ég talaði við fólkið þarna á íslensku og Eli. Hello Richard, long time no see, but you're doing great, absolute legend. Thank you very much, Benjamin. Я не знаю, на меня нормально, да, тоже. Do you prefer Slavic or Romance synonyms when you speak Romanian? I don't really mind, actually. I find it all very, very natural. I read more Romanian than I actually speak because I watch a lot of with Romanian subtitles. So let me see. So good to see so many of you. And I know that we're getting close to sort of the end. Is there any other questions you have? Feel free to ask them now. Okay. Vier talen is nu wel bizar is. Leer ik Engels. Volgens jou is dit normaal? Ik spreek 4 talen. Oké, ik heb eigenlijk geen vraag begrijpen. Maar ja, ik kan nog steeds Ja, nog weer schrijven. Even kijken. Ik heb het niet zo goed begrepen wat je bedoelt, eigenlijk. Maar kan je je vraag nog een keer formuleren? Dan antwoord ik graag. Oké. Even kijken. I think you said that the conference, that native speakers will understand from the context. Yeah, often from the context they will understand, they will pick it up. Or what happens as well, I think, when not just with your native language, but with the languages that you speak to an advanced level, sometimes you hear something, you misunderstand it, but then you still hold the sound in your mind. So when you realize it was something else, you can almost turn the film back in your mind and rehear it. That happened to me actually today on the phone with my wife. She said something, we speak Macedonian, and she said something to me, and then I realized that I'd misheard what she said, but then I could actually still go back and say, oh no, actually you said this, didn't you? And she goes, yeah. And then I answered the right question. It's a very odd feeling actually when you do that. But yeah, that happens. Let me see if there are any other questions here. What are my favorite languages to study or use? Oh, so many of them. It's very difficult to say. My favorite language, just like in terms of I enjoy German a lot. But yeah, I like a lot. Okay. Tell you a funny funny or embarrassing language anecdote. Actually, there are a couple of those on the italki channel. I made a few videos for them, and there are a couple on there, so you might want to look those up. Let me see. But yeah, I'm happy to say some more another time when I've got more time. But yes, of course. Engelsman vierde vreemdes. Oké, schamen. Oké. Als ze enkele tips me geven. En denkt je. Oké. Over Malta. Ja. Oké. Ik ben daar. Oké. Ja, je wil dan Maltese spreken. Ja. Dan ik kan eigenlijk. Ik heb een paar boeken van. Ik vind die mooi. Even kijken. Dat zijn eigenlijk. Even kijken. Dat zijn. Waar zijn ze? Oké, maar ik ga even die even verwijzen wat ik heb. Dus ja, dat is wel goed. Dat is van Charles Daniel Saliba. En, hij heeft ook een pagina op Facebook. En ook die boeken zijn wel mooi. Ik vind het ook ja, te gek hoe goed ze zijn. Dus ja, we moeten even met die boeken dan de taal leren, denk ik. Die zijn de allerbeste boeken die ik voor Maltese ken. Ik heb niks anders gezien dat eigenlijk ja, beter dan dat is. Okay. Let me see. Hello. I'm seeing lots of hellos. Okay, I've seen that Danish comment before, I think. Inventing dialogues in my head helps to get fluency. It can, yeah, absolutely. So things that you want to say, for example, is often a good thing to do. Thinking actively in the language is a really good way to practice the language and to use it. So I definitely am a fan of doing that. How comfortable do you feel in Italian compared to how you feel? Comfortable you feel? In the other languages. Yeah, fairly confident in Italian, actually, because I have a degree in it. So I had to write one of my theses, it was in Italian. So yeah, I feel fairly confident in Italian. I've worked in the language many times as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not Italian, but but yeah, I can more than get by in Italian. What's better motivation for learning languages? Because I find it true that I'm mostly interested in new languages. Yeah, I know that feeling as well, because of how they sound and how popular. Yeah, I know. It can be a problem. We get this kind of magpie syndrome where you go for the shiny object, right? Shiny object syndrome, or magpie syndrome, as I like to refer to it. Yeah, the new thing's always more exciting, and you see these memes as well on social media where you found this bright new thing, the child in the pool, and you're catching the new child, the baby, and you've forgotten about the other children around drowning, and they're your other languages. Absolutely. So it requires you to just be very conscious of, if you're going to do that, do it consciously. treat it as a new project. I treat those kinds of things as a project for delving into a language and experiencing language. So do it with that in mind, is my answer. Okay. Oh, well, okay, that's good to know. The sound and picture are better on Instagram than on Facebook. Thank you for letting me know that feedback. I don't know why, but strange. But anyway, I'm glad that at least you can hear me okay. Okay. Think I'm coming up to my hour, so I'm going to get cut off very soon. Yeah, I'm glad that you like that I'm doing this with my daughter with the languages. It's quite fun. Okay, so I didn't get to all of the questions. There are a lot of them, but I promise that I will come back again next week. We can talk again, and I will be happy to answer more questions. It was really, really nice to see you all. Thank you very, very much for coming. And yes, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and speak to you very soon. Take care.